Somebody who loves you taught you to be careful. Think about that for a second. Your parents told you to play it safe, get the steady job, and not take foolish risks. Your teachers told you to follow the rules, raise your hand, and wait your turn, and you would be fine. Your best friend told you not to dream too big because they did not want to see you get hurt, and because if you grew past them, it might feel like you were leaving them behind. The books on your shelf told you that hard work alone by itself would carry you to the top, as if effort were the only ingredient that mattered. The podcasts in your ears told you that if you just stayed positive and visualized hard enough, the universe would quietly sort out the rest for you. Even the government forms you fill out every year are built around the assumption that you will work, retire late, and hope a small pension and a small savings account are enough. None of these people were lying to hurt you. They were repeating what was repeated to them, passed down like an old coat that almost fits, handed from one well-meaning person to the next. But here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Some of the people who love you the most gave you beliefs that are quietly keeping you small, not on purpose, out of love, but still keeping you small by the people who love you most. There are two sets of rules in this world. There is the set taught in classrooms, in family kitchens, and in comment sections, the set that gets repeated so often that nobody questions where it came from in the first place. And there is the set practiced, quietly, by the small number of people who actually build the life everyone else says they want, but never quite reaches. Most people never see this second set because nobody hands it to you on the first day of school and nobody puts it in a graduation card. You have to go looking for it yourself, usually only after the first set has already let you down a few times. Tonight, you are going looking for it, whether you planned to or not. This video is not about 6 rules, and it is not about 10. It is about 7 beliefs. Exactly 7, not 6, because 6 leaves out the belief that quietly wrecks people in their 40s and 50s after they have already won once and assumed the hard part was finished. Not 8, because the 8th thing most people add to a list like this is usually just a repeat of pillar 4 wearing a slightly different hat, padding out a number instead of adding real weight. 7 is the number of beliefs that actually hold weight when you stack them up against each other. 7 is the number of walls that, once you knock them down in the right order, the rest of the house falls into place almost on its own, without needing 7 more years of effort behind it. Before we go further, you get one warning, and only one, and I'm only going to say it once. Some of what you are about to hear will contradict things you were told by people you trust and love, people who meant well every single time they said it. That is going to feel uncomfortable, maybe in your chest, maybe in your stomach, the way it feels when someone gently points out something true about you that you'd rather not look at directly. If you cannot sit with the feeling of being wrong about something you have believed for years, this is a good time to close the video and come back when you're ready, and that's perfectly fine. But if you are still here in 10 seconds, still watching, I am going to assume you want the truth more than you want comfort, and I'm going to talk to you like you mean that. This shows up everywhere once you know to look for it. It happens in the back office of a small hardware store in Tulsa, where the owner does the bookkeeping himself every Sunday night instead of paying someone else to guess at it. It happens in the break room of a warehouse outside Columbus, where one worker reads while everyone else scrolls. It happens at a kitchen table in a rented apartment in Fresno, where a mother is doing the math on a napkin at 11 at night, long after her kids are asleep, refusing to believe that this rented apartment is the end of her story. It happens in small towns nobody puts on a map, and in cities everyone has heard of, in family businesses passed down through 3 generations, and in brand new businesses with nothing passed down at all. The people who quietly build wealth and respect are not smarter than you, and they are not luckier than you. They simply stopped believing 7 things that almost everyone else still believes about themselves, usually without ever noticing they believe them. Let's go through them, one at a time, slowly, because each one deserves to actually land. Tonight you are going to meet 3 people over and over in different forms. You'll meet a janitor who quietly became a millionaire by refusing to wait for permission. You'll meet an immigrant who built 4 stores by refusing to look F. Or a shortcut, and you'll meet a handful of skilled tradesmen, a barber, a draftsman, a mechanic, who refused, each in their own quiet way, to believe their past, their isolation, their timing, or their own intelligence had already decided how their story would end. None of them are famous. None of them will ever be interviewed on a stage. That is exactly the point. The most useful examples in life rarely come with a spotlight attached. The first one is called the permission trap. The permission trap is the belief that you need to feel ready, qualified, or chosen before you are allowed to begin, as if there is a committee somewhere that has to approve your plan first. I held this belief for years. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed at 22 with a notebook full of plans, telling myself I would start as soon as I felt confident, as soon as the fear quieted down enough to let me move. I waited for a feeling that never arrived on its own. Confidence, it turns out, is not something you find before you act. It is something you build slowly, by acting while you are still scared, one small step at a time, with the fear sitting right there next to you the whole way. There was a janitor in a mid-sized office building in Akron, Ohio, who spent 31 years cleaning floors after the staff went home for the day. Nobody handed him permission to invest. No advisor sat him down, no degree told him he was qualified. He simply gave himself permission. He set aside a small, steady amount from every paycheck into simple, low-cost index funds, untouched, decade after decade, through good markets and bad ones, never checking it obsessively, never pulling it out early. When he passed away, his community found out, almost by accident, that he had quietly built an estate worth more than $1 million. He never felt qualified for any of it. He just never stopped showing up to the same simple habit. Here is the math, because the math is the only honest teacher in this room. If you save a modest amount every single month and let it grow at a steady average market return over 30 years, the final number is shockingly larger than the simple sum of what you put in, because growth compounds on top of growth, year after year, like a snowball rolling downhill and picking up more snow with every single turn it makes. The permission trap convinces you that the snowball needs your approval before it can even start rolling down the hill. It does not. A river does not wait for permission to carve a canyon out of solid rock. It just keeps moving, one drop at a time, for longer than anyone watching could ever stay patient, and the canyon shows up centuries later as the only proof anyone needs. The second belief is called the shortcut myth. The shortcut myth tells you that somewhere out there is a faster door, a hidden trick, a person who knows the secret that skips the line. I chased this one too. I spent 2 years jumping from one course to another, one scheme to another, looking for the version of success that did not require years of unglamorous repetition. What I found instead, eventually, was a man in a small town outside Birmingham, Alabama, who arrived in this country in his 20s with very little English and even less money. He started by stocking shelves at a grocery store, working nights, learning the business from the inside while everyone else clocked out. By the time he was 48, he owned 4 of those same kinds of stores. Not one shortcut, just the same long road, walked without stopping, year after unremarkable year. Notice that. The gap between income and spending is where wealth quietly grows, and that gap only widens with patience, never with a trick. If your income outpaces your lifestyle by even a small margin every year, and you protect that margin instead of spending it the moment it shows up, the spread between the two numbers becomes your engine. Most people get a raise and quietly raise their spending to match it within months, which means the spread never grows, no matter how much the income does. Shortcuts promise to close the distance to the top in one clever move. What actually closes it is widening the spread between what you earn and what you spend, then leaving that spread alone to work in the background of your life. A dam does not rush the water through. It holds it patiently behind a wall built for exactly that purpose, until the pressure itself becomes the power. If you are still with me, here is something worth sitting with for a second. You just learned that the trick you have been searching for does not exist, and that the actual lever has been sitting in your bank statement the whole time. In the gap between two numbers, you already see every single month. That is not a small thing to learn. Keep that in your pocket, because Pillar 3 is going to build directly on top of it. The third belief is called the sentence belief. This is the quiet idea that your past you, our mistakes, your bad year, your bad decade, has already written the ending of your story, and all that is left is to live out the sentence. I believed this for a long stretch after a financial mistake in my 20s that I was embarrassed to even say out loud for years afterward. I assumed I had used up my one chance, the way you assume a library only lets you check out a book once. A barber I came to know, working out of a small 2-chair shop outside Pittsburgh, had filed for bankruptcy in his 30s after a business partnership fell apart in a way that was not entirely his fault, but felt entirely his fault anyway. By most people's math, that was supposed to be the end of the story. Instead, he rebuilt slowly, learned to manage every dollar that came through his door with a kind of discipline he did not have before the collapse, invested in a modest rental property when he finally had savings again, and retired comfortably in his late 50s, owning his shop outright and renting out 2 more properties besides. Here is the math. A setback subtracts from your timeline once, on the day it happens. A belief that you are permanently broken subtracts from every single year that follows for the rest of your life, because it quietly stops you from trying again at the exact moment trying again would matter most. One loss is a number you can calculate and move past. A sentence belief is a tax you keep paying forever, with no due date and no end. Bamboo spends its first few years growing almost nothing visible above the ground, while its roots spread wide and deep underneath, doing work nobody can see. Then, in a matter of weeks, it shoots up taller than a house. The years that look like nothing are not nothing, they are roots. The fourth belief is called the lone wolf. This is the idea that asking for help, mentorship, or partnership is a sign of weakness, and that the truly successful person climbs alone, unaided, proving their worth through total self-sufficiency. I held onto this one with real pride for a long time, and pride is exactly the right word for it, because it kept me from learning things faster from people who already knew them, simply because I did not want to look like I needed anyone. There was a draftsman working for a small engineering firm outside Denver who quietly built a network of 5 or 6 other tradespeople over the years, sharing leads, referring clients back and forth, splitting larger jobs that none of them could have one alone, and meeting once a month, informally, just to talk through what was working and what wasn't. None of them got rich from one big stroke of luck. They got steady, year after year, from trading honest information instead of hoarding it the way most people instinctively do. Here is the math. If one person learns one new useful thing a year by trial and error alone, that is one new thing a year, slowly, painfully earned. If 5 people share what they learn with each other openly, each person effectively gains access to 5 lessons a year instead of 1, without doing any extra work to earn them. The network does not just add value to your life, it multiplies it quietly in the background every single month. Bees do not make honey alone in a single flower. They move together from bloom to bloom, sharing the location of the best flowers with the rest of the hive, and the hive is stronger for it than any single bee could ever be on its own. If you are still with me, notice what just happened. You learned that the lone wolf you have been taught to admire in movies and in business books is, in real life, usually the slowest version of success available, not the fastest. The fastest version almost always has quiet help built into it somewhere. Hold on to that, because the next pillar is going to ask you a harder question than any of the first 3. The 5th belief is called the late start. This is the belief that there was a window and you missed it, and now the door that other people walked through in their 20s has quietly closed for you, locked from the other side. I have heard this one from people in their 30s, their 40s, even their 60s, and each time it sounds completely reasonable, almost airtight, and each time it is wrong. A woman I came to know started her first small cleaning business at the age of 51. After raising 4 children and working a series of jobs that never quite added up to security, the kind of jobs that pay the bills but never build anything underneath them. Within 9 years, working steadily and reinvesting almost everything back into better equipment and a small, trusted crew, instead of taking the money out for herself early, she had built a business worth enough to retire comfortably and leave something behind for her children. Here is the math. If you have even 15 years left to work and save, and you start today instead of waiting another 5 years out of discouragement, you have just given your money 15 years of growth instead of 10, which sounds small until you actually sit down and calculate the difference. At a steady average rate of growth, those extra 5 years near the front of the timeline can be worth more than 5 extra years tacked on at the end, because compounding rewards early starts far more generously than it rewards late, desperate pushes. A tree planted today will not give you shade tomorrow or even next year. But a tree never planted will never give you shade at all, no matter how many years pass. The 6th belief is called the smart trap. This is the quiet, comfortable belief that because you are the smartest person in most rooms you enter, you do not need to listen as closely, learn as humbly, or change your mind as often as everyone else in the room. This one is sneaky because it disguises itself as confidence, and confidence is supposed to be a good thing, which makes the trap even harder to spot from the inside. I have watched talented, sharp people stall out in their careers and their finances for years, not because they lacked ability, but because they stopped asking questions once they decided they already knew the answers. A mechanic I came to know ran a small 2-bay garage outside Tampa for over 20 years, and he made it a rule, an actual rule he stuck to ask every new customer, every supplier, every younger mechanic he hired, what they knew that he didn't. He was, by any honest measure, very good at his job already. He still asked anyway. By the time he sold the shop and retired, he had built more savings than most people would ever assume a small garage owner could build, because he was endlessly willing to update what he believed, even at 50, even at 60. Here is the math. A person who learns nothing new for 10 years stays at the same level for 10 years, while the world quietly moves past them. A person who improves by even a small percentage every single year compounds that improvement the exact same way money compounds, until the gap between the two of them becomes enormous and impossible to close, even with twice the effort later. The smartest person in the room, ironically, is usually the one still asking questions in it, long after everyone else has stopped. A forest with the tallest trees still has the deepest, most tangled root systems below the surface, completely out of sight. Height without roots falls in the first real storm. If you are still with me, here is the consequence of what you just heard. The belief that your intelligence alone protects you is, itself, the thing most likely to quietly stall you out, usually right around the time everyone around you assumes you've already made it. The seventh belief is the one almost nobody talks about, because it only shows up after you've already won once, which is exactly why it deserves your full attention right now. The seventh belief is called the finish line. This is the belief, often held quietly by people who have already had one real win, that they have arrived, that the hard work is behind them, that they can finally stop building and start coasting for the rest of their life. This is the belief that gets people after they have already proven they know how to succeed, which is exactly why it is so dangerous, and exactly why most lists like this one leave it out entirely, focusing only on how to start instead of how to keep going once starting is no longer the problem. I have seen people build something real, relax completely, stop learning, stop adjusting, stop protecting what they built, and watch it quietly erode over the following decade, often without even noticing it was happening until the erosion was already deep. There is no single new archetype for this one, because it touches all three of the people you have already met tonight, and that is on purpose. The janitor in Akron kept saving the same modest amount every single month, even after his account passed 6 figures, even when friends told him he had clearly already won and could relax. The immigrant store owner outside Birmingham kept watching his margins closely, line by line, even after he owned all 4 stores, even when it would have been easy to hand the books to someone else and stop paying attention. The mechanic outside Tampa kept asking questions even after the shop was profitable beyond what he personally needed, simply because stopping never occurred to him as an option. None of them treated any single year, no matter how good it was, as the finish line. Here is the math. Wealth and skill do not hold their value automatically just because you stop paying attention to them. Without ongoing attention, both quietly erode, the same way an unused muscle weakens over months of sitting still, or an unmaintained machine slowly breaks down even while sitting perfectly idle in a garage, untouched, looking fine from the outside the entire time. There is no finish line in this game, only a long straight road with O marked end, and the people who stay on it simply keep walking past the exact point where everyone else quietly decided they were done. A seed does not stop needing water the day it becomes a sapling, and a sapling does not stop needing water the day it becomes a tree. It needs water for the rest of its life, every season, without exception. So there they are, all 7, laid out next to each other. The permission trap, which tells you to wait for a feeling that never comes. The shortcut myth, which sends you looking for a door that doesn't exist instead of widening the gap you already control. The sentence belief, which turns one bad year into a life sentence you never appealed. The lone wolf, which mistakes isolation for strength. The late start, which counts the years you've lost instead of the years you still have. The smart trap, which lets intelligence quietly replace curiosity. And the finish line, which convinces a person who has already won once that winning was a single event instead of a daily habit. 7 beliefs. 7 small lies told with good intentions by people who love you, by your own tired mind at the end of a long day, by a culture that rewards talking about change far more than it rewards actually changing. Here is the great paradox sitting underneath everything you just heard. Every single one of these 7 beliefs is simple enough to fit on the back of a napkin. You could explain all 7 of them to a 12-year-old in about 5 minutes, and they would understand every word without needing a single one explained twice. There is no advanced math here, no secret formula, no special access that only certain people get. And yet, fewer than 1 person in 50 will actually go and change a single belief because of what they heard tonight. Not because it is complicated, because it is uncomfortable, and because most people would rather keep an old belief that feels safe and familiar than try on a new one that feels exposed and a little bit frightening. It is the difference between knowing a thing and living as if you actually believe it. Almost everyone can recite a version of these 7 ideas if you ask them directly. Almost nobody rearranges their actual daily life around them. That gap between how simple this is and how rarely anyone actually does anything about it is the entire game. It always has been, going back generations, long before this video, long before any video. So here is what I want you to do, starting tonight, not next week, not after one more video on this same subject. Get 1 sheet of paper and a pen, an actual physical pen, not a notes app on your phone, because there is something about the slowness of handwriting that makes a promise feel heavier than typing ever does. Stand in front of a mirror if you can, because looking at your own face while you make a promise changes something in how seriously you keep it afterward. Write down 3 things, only 3, no more than 3, because a list of 10 good intentions usually means none of them get done. Write down which one of these 7 beliefs has quietly been running your life, the one that made your stomach tighten a little while you were listening. Write down the one specific action you will take in the next 30 days to prove that old belief wrong, something concrete enough that you could describe it to a stranger in 1 sentence. And write down the date, today's date, and sign your own name underneath it, the way you would sign a contract, because that is exactly what this is. Not a wish, not a vague hope. A contract with yourself, witnessed by no one but you. Put that paper somewhere you will see it every single morning for the next 30 days, on a mirror, on a refrigerator, taped to the inside of your front door. 30 days is not a random number. It is long enough to prove a new belief is real through repetition, and short enough that you cannot quietly talk yourself out of it by telling yourself you'll start later, the way you've told yourself before. 98 of you watching this will nod along, agree with every single word, maybe even feel a little proud of yourself for understanding it so quickly, and change absolutely nothing about how you live tomorrow morning. The video will end, the next one will start, and the paper will stay in the drawer. 2 of you will actually write the paper, sign it, tape it where you'll see it, and follow it for 30 straight days, even on the days it feels pointless, even on the days nothing seems to be happening yet. I don't know which one of you that is. You do, and you've probably known since around the third pillar. The room you are sitting in right now, with your phone in your hand and this video almost over, already contains everything you need to begin. Not someday, not next month, not after one more course or one more book. Tonight, the paper is probably within arm's reach right now. The pen is probably in a drawer 3 feet away or in a coup. Pee on your desk or in your bag by the door. Nothing outside of you needs to change before you start this. No new job, no new luck, no new permission from anyone. Only one belief does, and you already know which one it is. In the next video, we are going to go one layer deeper into the single belief out of these 7 that almost nobody admits to holding, even to themselves, even while they are actively holding it, and even while it is quietly costing them the most. Until then, hold onto your 3 lines on that paper, check them every morning, and resist the urge to add a 4th one, because 3 is the number that actually gets finished, while 10 is the number that quietly gets forgotten by the second week. I'll see you there.